Photography Daily is a Loading Zone production.
Guess who has blessed us with his presence this week? Yes, Sir Barkalot. It's not always possible to bring Sir Barkalot on these photo walks when I travel a bit further afield. And on days where there's something else scheduled alongside the photo walk, it becomes a lot harder. But yeah, today's with me. Come on, Barney, this way. I'll try not to make it one of those walks where you hear me constantly calling Barney. He's pretty good off the lead, but I don't trust him always. Where I know there's wild animals like deer, I wouldn't stand a chance on recall. I mean, I could this way, come on. I could offer up the choicest cut of sirloin with a peppercorn sauce, any trimmings he should want, and doggy Merlot, and he still wouldn't come back if there were a deer, would you? No, probably not. Yeah, I know, I can see it in your eyes. Right, let's make the first picture of the day. I've been rather affected by Sean Tucker's, in a good way this is, Sean Tucker's assignment of a good few weeks back, where we were isolating with our exposure, the light and the dark, exposing for the light, and this works on particularly good sunny contrasty days, and letting the dark part of the image just completely fade to black. And while I've got the sunshine, which I haven't got for the entire walk today, Barney, you're in shot. Come back. While I've got the sunshine, let me try and do this. We've got some overcast weather on the way. F5, shutter speed 100th. There's this wonderful tree just off along this path that cuts right through the middle of it. And it leans, it's almost 45 degrees to the left. It's a fascinating tree. A good theme for today, actually. That wasn't planned. That's just as it happened.
The Foreword.
Today's show is brought to you by the letter S for serendipity, the fact of finding interesting or valuable things by chance, an unplanned, fortunate discovery. Important often for invention and discovery, close quotes. Serendipity, which for Barney is really just finding a great stick. He does pick the strangest sticks, the biggest challenges. But serendipity is one of my favourite facets of being human, I think. Serendipity, chance, unplanned eureka moments that can come from it. I think in some ways, in many ways, this podcast has a little serendipity rolling through it. Or maybe just evolution, because I think the two can be quite closely related, can't they? What started out as a straight interview programme, listening to a guest being the storyteller, you know the score, that's the way many podcasts work, became so much more potent when I found quite by accident that you are an extraordinarily good storyteller as well, and that by marrying your stories with a guest's, with me really as the narrator, the sort of, or the link man, a wannabe, a very wannabe Morgan Freeman, has much merit when it comes to discovering the interesting and the valuable. I tell you what, I could listen to Morgan Freeman read the telephone directory for hours on end. And I'm finding this week that serendipity plays such an important role in our photography from a few people that I've spoken with, one of whom is next week's guest. But this week, I think, serendipity plays an important role in how my storytelling guest, Gareth Ewan-Jones, finds his wonderful personal projects, one in particular. And I want you to think back to 2020. Oh, Neil, must we? 2020? Hardly a year I cherish, one I don't really want to think back to, I know. But just go with me on this one. Around the world, everyone had very different rule regimes, and some still do, of course, when it came to how you were allowed to interact with each other, where you could go, who you could spend time with, how long you could be out, and so on. But my reference point, obviously, is our rules, the one that we had here. So from March to June 2020, that was the initial lockdown, as we called it, encouraged to stay within our doors. Unless you were very much needed to work in a workplace, being, I don't know, a key worker was the phrase really, wasn't it? The nurses and those that worked in the supermarkets and those sort of jobs. Unless you were one of those workers, you were encouraged very much to stay indoors. You could go out for exercise once a day, and I think it was about an hour at most. And we all played what I refer to as the COVID dance. If you met anybody while you were out, people would whole families would cross the road to walk in a rectangle around you. I found that the most dispiriting thing about that whole period. I really did. If you were walking as we are today along a footpath here, and there wasn't much room, and two families met each other, they would both thrust themselves into the hedgerows. They'd go through this funny breathing routine. Breathe in and hold breath until everybody had gone past by about 20 seconds. Then, I think I'm okay to breathe. The virus must have fallen to the floor by now. Or they would turn into the hedge so that they weren't looking at you. As I say, a very dispiriting time. So the restrictions were tight, and they kind of loosened a bit when we got to summer for the first time. And as photographers, well, many of us who hadn't before, I think we started photographing nature or appreciating nature in a way that we perhaps hadn't before. Photographing rivers and wildlife, birds, trees, which is pertinent for today. And that's what my guest did, Gareth Ewan-Jones, though he found by chance a project that's captured so many people's hearts and imagination. I would imagine that had it not been for COVID, his project might not have moved on quite so far with everything else in his busy life usually. So he too, he found solace in the countryside, as many of us did if we were lucky enough to have green fields within reach. And as I say, he found trees, and for extra personal safety, the cover of dusk and darkness. You see, when we were all coming in from our walks, he was going out for his. And the serendipity of this story is that by a mixture of invention and chance and necessity, he needed to solve a problem: how to light the trees at night.
Today on the Photowalk.
I had the drone for ages, and I just sort of thought, well, I'm going to attach a flashlight, a small 100-watt flashlight to it. Yeah. It might burn out the motors, it might be the end of the Mavic, but I'll just see what it does. So I actually superglued a flashlight. Was the first time I've done it. I superglued a flashlight to the bottom of a Mavic Pro, if you can imagine such a thing. I've got photos of it.
Stories of life told by photographers. And today those stories come from Gareth Ewan-Jones, Giles Penfout, Niels Armelings, and you. It's a unique, special kind of photography podcast made from the letters that you send in, the thoughts that you have, and words from our special inspirational guests. It's me with a camera, you with a camera, walking in the countryside or the wilds, or if you're a street photographer, probably more likely an urban landscape. So whatever you photograph with, be it a phone, a mirrorless, or a pinhole made from a large block of cheese, and before you think I've lost a few f-stops, I give you episode 196, when I spoke to Brendan Barry, the fantastical camera inventor. This isn't a show that will make you feel a little uneasy just because you didn't know George Eastman was the founder of Kodak, which, by the way, nearly wasn't called that at all. It could have been Odak. That was sitting on the table. It's just that George felt K was a stronger letter to start the made-up word with. No, it's about how we feel when we make pictures, what it does for us, and what it does for others. And in that 6.6 billion people on this planet can make a picture today with something, there's a lot of us about to walk with on our photo walk today. In the mailbag and on the show today, slowing right down, wonderful moments of quiet when the camera seems to know what mood you're in, or at least the light does. We talk a bit today about one of our old chestnut topics of sound, and how it can be a part of photography, not just there as something video can enjoy. I'll introduce you to Medium if you've never been to it before, and I don't mean the person that tries to connect you with the late George Eastman beyond the grave to ask what was wrong with spelling Kodak with a C. After all, George, it might have made more sense in that camera isn't spelt with a K. No, we'll take you to Medium, the website and the app, We talk personal projects, caravans, Morris dancing, and trees lit from above. Our patrons reveal what things have happened that have helped them understand, or better, their photography. And we hear about some trips that you've been making with your cameras. So, shall we walk then? Checklist out. Coffee and Garibaldi's packed. Check. Boots on and laced. Check. Walking trousers or shorts. Check. Spare batteries, check. Memory cards or spare film, check. Earbuds in, check. Lens caps off, of course. Let's walk. Important news. I need one of those news flash bleepers. Boop, 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 boop. Yes, mpb.com have a brand new website. They are the number one and my personal preferred way to shop when I'm looking to buy, trade or sell used camera kit online. And if you are in the UK or America or Europe, and I can hand on heart say, at least go take a look, because I don't believe you will be disappointed with the service and the guarantee and the Aladdin's cave worth of kit that is on the site. So yes, their new website, which has been a little time in development, has newer, more powerful ways to search. There's now a way to take a peek, for example, at the latest uploaded kit. I sat there dribbling for at least half an hour, which usually is the result of a Garibaldi dead fly biscuit, but no, not that night. And I'm very grateful to mpb.com, a company that so generously show their faith and support in this project of ours. These walks that we make together, making our photographic imprint. So my message today is quite simply type in mpb.com into your browser and go on a new adventure with them. Plus, read this new original content section that they have, which has stories and kit reviews and ideas. And this week, and I'll link to it in the show notes, but after talking about underwater photography a couple of weeks ago, I thought you might be interested to read their interview with Lexi Lane, who has her own approach to underwater work, which is simply exquisite and very artful. So, my storytellers, what is in the mailbag this week? Well, I'm going to start this week letter-wise with something I received with a picture for an assignment that we had back in April with documentary. It was set by documentary photographer Giles Penfound. If you haven't yet listened to one of the new assignment shows, they've been there a good few months now. They go out on Mondays. It's a show anywhere between 6 minutes and maybe double that. And we have many photographers, a different one each week, though some do return and set more. We've had a few from Sean, we've had a few from Sean Tucker, that is. We've had a few from Valerie Jardin, and there'll be more to come from Valerie as well. We've got another recording session coming up. She set some great assignments. And it's a chance to think differently about your photography for the next, I always say 7 days, but we've the assignment set this week is for a little bit longer, and there's one coming up where you have the entire month to think about it. Say no more, no spoilers. So that's the assignment show, and it goes out on a Monday. And Giles's assignment was to stop time, really. Not just as a photographic frame, but to study the object or the subject for a good 15 minutes, maybe more, before making one solitary shutter press. So you really get to drink in the moment and the scene in front of you and the picture before you actually go and make it. You get to think and consider and plan, ruminate, find, all those things. And there were some super images, of which you can see as a link on the show page today, or by going to episode 295. It seems perhaps a mite unfair to pick from, one picture from the challenges when there are so many strong assignment pictures that you're making. But now and then I think I will. And today I'm going to pick an image that I've included on the show page from Owen Vakel. It's a single chair in a converted shed come office, and sheds will play a theme in next week's show, funnily enough, as you'll find out. Anyway, this shed has the sun shining in, just gently kissing the edge of a table, and it's a real story of peace as a picture. And I love photographs like that. They're the sort that if you find a picture of peace in a gallery, you and I must go to a gallery And I find I can stand in front of a picture for a long time and just drink in the serenity. And I thought this particular picture, as I say, included it on the show notes today, is one of those hold your breath moment pictures. But the letter that came with it, that I'd like to read to you, made me think about how precious being able to say what we feel through a photograph really is. So from Owen, at the bottom of my garden, says Owen, is a shed that I've converted into my man cave, for want of a better description. It's a creative space where I play music and I think about photography, including listening to your podcast, actually, and also I write. But essentially it's an office, and I spend many an hour at the desk and the chair studying for my part-time geography degree with the Open University. This past academic year has been particularly challenging, with various family issues to deal with, while simultaneously tackling my own mental health issues and a visit to the surgeon's operating theatre. Thankfully, it turned out to be not life-threatening, but a worry nonetheless. As you can probably imagine, It all got a bit too much at times, and it crossed my mind just to quit the course altogether on several occasions. The day I made this image, though, he says, was the day I submitted my end-of-year assignment. As I sat back in the armchair in the opposite shed corner, I felt the weight of the year just, drain out of me. I stared at this space while contemplating all the hours that I've sat there, taking each day of my studies, one day at a time. It was mid-afternoon when the sun came pouring in through the shed door, creating the sharp contrast that helped me to isolate my subject and let the background distractions fall into complete darkness, much like I've had to do throughout my studies. Owen, what a sentiment, truly. And your picture, through its wondrous simplicity and the narrative that you've painted so very well. And I think I'll add, I think you've been rather poetic there too, which is good. It's testament to how photography can be a precious, precious gift. And when I saw your picture and read your words, it was every bit as powerful as some of the most striking portraits that I see, and the message that they sometimes give when you look at them. So yes, I'm sharing your picture again today on the show page, and I think as the first few words of inspiration, we should revisit episode 295 and listen to Giles Penfound talking about this assignment that he set, where you really had to stop and feel and experience way before you even thought about pressing the button. And in case you're thinking, I'd like to have taken part in that, the assignments, as I repeat now and then, they are not necessarily for the week of release. If you come across those assignments in a week, a month, 2 months, 3 months, I don't know, even the year, you can take the assignment from that moment onwards with your photography. Here's Giles.
What I'd suggest, what I'd like you to do, is to go out and find a location that you like. Find a location that you find interesting, and go there and spend some time in that location and experience that place. Spend at least 15 minutes, if not half an hour, experiencing this place.
So do not take a picture for 15 minutes. Look at it, decide what you're going to make an image of, and be more considered.
Yeah, and because I think if you just arrive there and go, I'm going to take a picture of that, it's too quick, it's too spontaneous, and sometimes spontaneity is really good. But what I want you to do is to look around, is take that time to breathe, take that time to take in the atmosphere, how the environment impacts on you, how you impact on the environment, the wind, your emotions. And it sounds a bit all woo-woo, but it's wonderful, it really is, because I think eventually what you'll do, and it's not a question about timing yourself, it's 15 minutes are up, it's time to take a picture. It's getting yourself to the place where you look around, you start to notice things. You've taken the time to look around and see what's there, and see things perhaps that you didn't see or didn't recognize or didn't have a reaction to. And when you see something that you can engage with, that you want to tell somebody else about, which therein lies the aspect of telling a story.
Giles Penfound with his assignment from episode 295. As I've said, you don't have to join in with assignments on the week of release. If you don't get to the assignment for a week, a month, 3 months, a quarter, that's fine. You just get to the assignments when you do, and of course there'll be I hope there'll be a strong portfolio of challenges as the year goes on. Right, before the next letter, thank you to those that are still taking part in the Community 365 project. We're quite a way through. I feel like we're on the home stretch with it now. The 365 project, the Community 365 project, is really there for you to take part in. If you've always fancied doing a 365, but you think, I'm not quite sure I can do an image every single day. So we have our Community 365, which gives you an opportunity to send the occasional picture in from where you are in the world, what you've been doing, and we include it on the tab on the website. Neatly labelled, of course. It does what it says on the tin, Community 365. And I've seen some new names of late. Jeff Sofrano was new to those contributing over the last 7 days. Intriguing observation, Jeff, on London's Millennium Bridge. And over the weekend, I'd like to give a mention to last weekend. This is Anna McCarthy's picture, which she made from below the extraordinary flypast that went over London for the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, which I know the eagle-eyed amongst you have spied my mistake in calling it the Diamond one. I was in my time machine, clearly. So keep sending them in, your pictures, to be posted within our 365 feature, which is getting a few visitors. And if you give me a link to your Instagram or your website or your Flickr, then we'll link back to you so that those that are going to the Community 365 get a chance to see extended portions of your work as well. So send your emails to studio@photographydaily.show. That's the email address, and your pictures there, your stories there. And if you can, please remember 2000 pixels on the wide side. If you are using a smartphone, don't worry, you can just send it best quality. Right, you know how I say I will always get to your letter. Here is proof. Chris Ferreira sent me a note a couple of months ago about something he had not tried before when taking photographs, and that was about recording sound to go with them. Something I know we touch on from time to time on this show, making audio recordings to go with your still images. So if you go on, I don't know, say holiday, you make your pictures, and then you present them as a film, accompanied by the orchestra of real sound, i.e. the sound of people on the street, or the sound of people on a beach, or the waves crashing, or like now with the bird life as we walk along this path on today's Photowalk. There we go. Above me, to the left, to the right, all around me. And then your viewers can essentially live the pictures. And I know that still image paints a thousand words, but there's, when you present a still image with sound, it is quite magical. I call it a photo film. And it's amazing that people actually think that they're sometimes seeing I've had this mention, that they think they are seeing the pictures move. Sound is a very, very powerful and potent tool. So from Chris, his letter. Hi Neil, I know you're an audio man, and so you inspired me to venture into that world as well. I went and bought myself a humble little Tascam audio recorder, and I've been playing around with that on a recent trip. If you go to my Medium profile, you'll find a link to a recent adventure with audio and photos. Would love to hear your feedback, as quite frankly, I know nothing about this new territory. Thank you, Chris. I will tell you what I thought in a moment. Firstly, though, I know my other listener might be asking, Neil, what's Medium? I am glad you asked. So Medium, well, here is something that is an absolute goldmine of wonderful ideas and inspiration. He says, sounding like he just looked that up on Tinternet. Medium is essentially a social publishing platform that everybody can write for and use. It's kind of like, well, I suppose it's like a blogging platform. It's called a blogging platform, but I think of it as much more than a blogging platform. Not that Not that there's anything wrong with a blogging platform. I think of it like a great big, free, digital, amazing magazine of articles. You can go on it and find subjects and topics that suit you, and then you can filter them. Bookmark them across all your devices, as Medium is a wonderful app as well. And you'll find all kinds of interesting corners where you can, well, sometimes you find these great top-notch professional writers just trying out new ideas. It's a bit like open mic at a comedy club, where sometimes these really famous comedians, I've had this happen, turn up and you think, why, what are you doing here? And they're just trying out some new material and enjoying the process of that. Through to writers making their very first articles, which is just as fascinating. It's divided up into topics, which you can choose so that you see more of the topics that you're personally interested in. And for me, that's philosophy and mindfulness and writing and podcasts. Well, they're just four of my favourites. And then I follow particular writers too, but usually for me it's mainly following the actual topics. So there we go. That's Medium at a glance. And Chris Ferreira, he is on Medium. He's posted a postcard. In this case, a film that he made, which he calls a postcard, featuring his photographs laid over music and also the sounds that he took as he recorded took some of those pictures. And then he's placed this film on his Medium page with below it some words. The first paragraph, which I will read to you, and then I've linked to it on the show notes today because I'd really like you to go and read the rest. His words, they call Paris the city of love, writes Chris. Possibly true, possibly a marketing ploy. But it did get me thinking, what if there's a ranking system for such a place filled with life and love and laughter in public, a place where colonial beauty meets urban grit, a place as vast as it's loud, full of excitement and passion, not necessarily in a romantic way, but in a human way where the culture allows for public expression. Needless to say, as a photographer, says Chris, this place is paradise. If there were an actual ranking system for a City of Love category, this place would sit among my top list. Now, they are some of Chris's words. It's not Paris that he's talking about, by the way, or that he's made his film and his photographs about. It's a different city altogether. And the story goes on to reveal where it is. Oh, Barney. Sorry, Chris. Barney, stop. Oh, he's rolling in something. Come on. No. Why do they do that? It's a really good article, Chris. And I know you are in the early stages of building your work on that Medium profile of yours. And keep going, I say. Yeah, keep going. Because I love the film that you've made. It's just a short film with the sounds from the city that you photographed. It's such a great way to engage me in the adventure that you had, the journey that you made. Super observations, really. From the moment it's only a 3 minutes long film, but from the moment the film starts, we're looking out of the airliner window as you approach your destination, and you can hear the words of that sort of welcome to the city. Simple stuff like the picture of the dinosaur on the backpack. I mean, I can tell that you've wandered across this city with your eyes fully wide open, photographing all kinds of details. The couple stealing a kiss in front of the shop, that was glorious, with what looks like it's possibly maybe their son with his head down. Oh, Mum and Dad, please don't do that. The wonderful pictures of the dogs asleep in the sunshine, bathing in the sunshine. I love the short excerpts, the sound excerpts that you played in. Very subtle sounds of children. There's a bird call, I think. If I had one thing, since you did ask for feedback, that I may have added more of, it wouldn't necessarily be the pictures, because your storytelling there is exquisite. It would be, I'd like to hear a bit more of the sound, a bit more of that city, a bit more of the laughter and and the chatter in the city, and yeah, just a tad more, that's all. But really, this is phenomenal work. Bravo, I say, with a capital B in all ways. So look, let me play you just a few moments to demonstrate how it sounded. It does have music on it from Artlist, so I'm allowed to play it. The track, if you're interested, Plant Your Fields by We Dream of Eden. And you will hear, it's subtle, but you will hear the sound of these pictures playing through. Well done, Chris. Fabulous work, really. And thank you so much for sending that in. Well, I hope you get a subtle sense of the story of Chris Ferreira when he visited this magical city that he writes about on Medium. All the links, of course, on the show page today. Do go and visit the show pages. Neil, you tell us often enough to do that. Well, I do, for good reason. They take a while to put together. There's pictures, of course, that are sent in from the walks that you're making, with links to your Instagram and your websites and your Flickr. And a Medium, in this case, of course, now as well. And yeah, it's always a joy to receive them. So send them to studio@photographydaily.show, the email address for the show, studio@photographydaily.show, 2,000 pixels on the wide side. If you can send them in unwatermarked, that works quite nicely with the design. Try and send them in either landscape or portrait. And the reason for that is that they then don't necessarily need to feature within what's called a carousel. The carousel makes the pictures a bit smaller on some displays, whereas if you send them in one shape, then it's easier to have them open up on your within your browsers. But it's not completely necessary, but it's just a way of me being proud of showing your work larger, really, that's all. And yeah, 2,000 pixels on the wide side if you're sending them in from your smartphones. And I heard about, I can't remember her name. Oh, that's terrible. Come on, Neil, recall. Well, I'll research and find out. But I heard about a filmmaker in Madrid. Yes, she was in Madrid making these extraordinary films with her Huawei, I think it was. Oh, recall's coming. Will you get the name? Well, you know what I'm like with names. I will find out. I will remember. So yeah, smartphone pictures, very, very welcome. Now, I have a friend of mine, the photographer Brad Wakefield, to thank for my introduction to this week's guest, Gareth Ewan-Jones. They both worked together in a news agency once upon a photographic time. And Brad sent me a link one day to Gareth's work with the words, it was quite a short email, "I think this is right up your street." And he wasn't wrong, because it was a link not to his commercial and fantastic branding and editorial work, which is much and varied. And to be honest, I could quite easily have turned it into a conversation about his portrait commissions. But no, it was to 3 tabs on his website that intrigued me, fascinated me, and made me smile in equal measure. The titles were Tree, Caravan, and Boss. Personal projects that are the currency of invention and passion for many a professional photographer. And we'll start with, perhaps, if he doesn't mind me referring to it as such, the headlining act of the 3, this extraordinary idea to make pictures in an entirely unique way. Pictures of the majestic Time Lord of the forest. That was poetic, Neil. Well, I'm trying to be. The tree. Here is Gareth Ewan-Jones, proving that serendipitous moments are so very, very precious to us all as photographers. Gareth, I always hesitate to say anything good came out of COVID, not because it didn't provide opportunities for photographers to express themselves in a way that they otherwise might have done, but of course we have this sort of chaos that it caused both socially and economically. But the Trees Project, well, it is a perfect example, isn't it, of something that you might not otherwise have tried had it not been for the pandemic.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I think without the pandemic, that project would never have gotten off the ground. It was one of those things that had been in the back of my mind for a while, for a number of years. I'd thought about what might be a way of photographing trees, and it's quite a tricky thing to do. I mean, I am a portrait photographer by trade, and so I'd always liked the idea of portraits of trees, but couldn't quite work out how to do it. And I remember thinking about maybe hanging, large muslin cloths and things like that behind trees, which was totally practical. And so I'd never really worked out how to do it. But as I say, it was in the back of my mind. And then born of the lockdown, I just suddenly had, as a freelance photographer, like many others, found myself with no work and lots of free time. And that was it. I just started sort of really focusing on it. I'm quite lucky where we live here in Wiltshire. We're surrounded by beautiful hills, beautiful trees. Yeah. It just meant I could get out and about and try things out and test it. And it was a long old testing before I actually managed to get it to work. So I started the project really, I think I started buying bits of kit in to see what would work and what wouldn't work. That was probably 2020. And then I probably didn't really get a good picture for about 6 months because I was just trying different things, and sometimes it would work, sometimes it wasn't, but it was never quite right. So there was a lot of, it was I think what I'm trying to say it was a long process that I just would never have had time to do if it hadn't have been for the lockdowns and all my work being taken away as sort of horrible as that was at the time.
Well, let's talk about technically how it did work out in the end, because you tried things for a little while, then there was a eureka moment, I suppose, which involves this unusual lighting of the tree.
Yeah, exactly. It's the lighting was the tricky thing, because as I say, I was thinking about how to isolate a tree, how to make it like a portrait. So the focus is solely on the tree. There's nothing else in the background. If you're doing a portrait of a person, you don't really, I mean, it might work here and there, but you don't really want lots of people in the shot. You just want, and with trees, they don't tend to be on their own. They tend to be surrounded by lots of other trees. Yeah,
you always find the perfect tree, and there's 3 or 4 in the background. You think,
totally. That's it. And so you can find an interesting looking tree, but it might be engulfed by others. So it was just solving that was the big thing at first. I use lighting quite a lot in my sort of everyday work, and I know from that you can really knock backgrounds out if you're just lighting a subject. And so I thought, well, that might work with the tree, but then you'd need the light very high in the air. You'd need darkness. You'd need a way of kind of just making that tree stand out from everything else. And so then drones became the obvious answer, like how to get a drone in the air and attach a light to it. So I played around with smaller prosumer drones like Mavic Pros. And so that was my first attempt at it, was using that tiny little Mavic Pro, which is an amazing drone, but it
can't pick stuff up in the air.
Lift much weight. I mean, it's capable of small amounts. I think it's 300 grams or something like that, but it's not capable of much. But I actually, I had the drone for ages, and I just sort of thought, well, I'm going to attach a flashlight, a small 100-watt flashlight to it. Yeah. It might burn out the motors. It might, be the end of the Mavic, but I'll just see what it does. So I actually superglued a flashlight. Was the first time I ever did it. I superglued a flashlight to the bottom of a Mavic Pro, if you can imagine such a thing. I've got photos of it. Right. Hand launched it, sent it off. The motors were screaming. It was awful. I knew it wasn't going to last, but it worked. I got the flash a good sort of 45 feet above the tree, flashed it at nighttime, and instantly I was pretty blown away by the results. Like, it just looked much better than I had hoped for. It just straight away, I could see there was a lot of potential there. Yeah. And so then I thought, well, this, the Mavic, small drones and small lights is not the way to go here. This isn't going to last. And so then it was just a case of doing lots of research, getting on there's a lot of great drone forums out there. There's lots of people that do all their own self builds and things. And that was initially how I thought I'd take on the endeavor, would just be kind of putting something together myself, because there's a lot of DJI drones, like hexacopters and octocopters from like the early 2010s that are quite
really
cheap these days.
Large, huge ones, aren't they?
They are, yeah. There's also one behind me, but I don't think it's on the camera.
You're just at the very edge of it sticking out.
Yeah, exactly. There we go. So that's an S900. So then a DJI S900. So then I managed to find one going very cheap on eBay, and played around with that for a few months of rigging bigger and bigger flashlights to it, and it worked perfectly. Every time I lit a tree, it looked really nice, but I just never quite trusted the technology. So because the drones are getting on for 10 years old,
Yeah.
they don't have redundancies in them, so they don't have two GPS consoles, and they don't have things that if one thing, if one thing fails, that's it. It's all over. Whereas the more modern drones tend to have everything kind of backed up.
Yeah.
So I was always very nervous flying because it's huge and it's very heavy. I mean, at one point I was attaching like 3 kilograms of lights to them, and just thinking, it's nice because I'm in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of a forest, or out on a hill, there's no one around. So that kind of felt safe. But in the back of my mind, I always worried that these things would just shoot off and I'd lose it. And, so it terrified me. Every time I did it, it terrified me. So what actually happened in the end was I wrote a sort of very long and nice email to DJI. And I sent them a few photos of what I was trying to do. And I explained that, I'd bought DJI products and I was using this hexacopter to do it, but I just didn't quite trust it. And would they be able to loan me anything? And they were absolutely amazing. They sent me a much more modern drone that had a very high lifting capacity, and just let me borrow it while I was doing the project. So I was very lucky from that point of view. So from then on, it was fine. It was just I had the drone, I had the lights. It was just finding the trees.
Now, you said that you expressed a certain terror when it came to the time that you chose to photograph them, because whilst everybody else was walking in of a night and thinking that's it, lock ourselves up, listen to the next COVID advice from the government, you were heading out with your camera and a flash and a drone on your own.
Yeah, I was very surprised by how frightening of an experience that is. I mean, perhaps it's obvious, but I just sort of thought it's a kind of childish thing. Like, you're out on your own in the dark. In the dark, fine.
In the forest. In the forest,
exactly. You can overcome that. But this is what I thought. I said, you can overcome that. You can rationalize, and it's fine. But actually, I think there's something innate within us. It's like almost like a survival mechanism, that those sorts of situations you shouldn't be there, or you need to be on the watch out, or it's like perceived as dangerous. And I just could never override it. It was quite an interesting thing to observe in myself. Especially, I mean, sometimes I'd be out in the open and that sort of felt a bit more relaxing. But when I'd go deep into forests, for example, one of the trees in the project is the King of Limbs. I don't know if you've seen that one. It's it's an ancient oak. Yeah. It's in the Savernake forest near Marlborough. Yeah,
I know the forest as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a beautiful forest, but it's quite a spooky place.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
It's magical, but also spooky. Yeah. And the one, when I went and photographed the King of Limbs, it was a good sort of 2 kilometers into the forest from the path where I'd parked the car. And I'm sort of wheeling in all my kit, going in, and I always sort of shot at dusk for the most part. And going in as the light sort of dropping, and I'm quite relaxed. I'm sort of excited about what's going to happen. And then get the drone up, get the lights on, everything looks magical and it's beautiful. And I'm not thinking about anything else except what I'm doing. And then as soon as the drone comes down, and I'm on my own, and all the lights are off, and I mean, it was really quite terrifying. I mean, I remember coming home like almost high with the amount of adrenaline. I never quite managed to override it. I don't know if it's just me, but I suspect anyone in that situation it would be quite sort of shocked at how much of an impact it has on you.
Did you meet anybody on your travels that where you thought, this feels a bit uncomfortable, or anybody Absolutely. that were people have a very funny thing about drones, don't they? And there you are at certain times of when we were told to be inside, not to be frivolous with our time outside exercising, and there you are with a drone taking pictures of trees.
Yeah, well, I should clarify that I did sort of. So because the lockdown sort of waxed and waned and changed and stuff, I was never out and about when I wasn't supposed to be out and about. So I never had problems with that so much but I know what you mean about the people's instinctive reaction to drones doesn't tend to be good, does it? But I guess because I was in very remote places most of the time, I would bump into people, but it wasn't, it wasn't within close proximity of lots of dog walkers or anything like that. I think bumping into people in the middle of the woods in the dark is a strange experience in itself, and that happened a couple of times. They're probably as frightened of you as you are of them, but you're sort of thinking, what are you doing out in the dark on your own in the woods? I know what I'm doing. I'm here. I've got this thing. I've got a legitimate reason to be here. Why are you out in the middle of the forest? It's quite it's frightening, really frightening. Yeah. But yeah, I only had one bad experience of somebody reacting badly to a drone, which was a farmer. I was on public land. I was very careful with making sure I was on public land and all that sort of stuff. Because I knew that it had. I thought the project had legs, and I thought I wanted to kind of put it out there. So I wanted to make sure that everything would be fine going forward. So I was on public land, but it was farmed by I think the farmer rented the land, and it was dusk, as I say, and it was on top of this hill, and I think he could see the tree that I was lighting up from his farm. And drones have rear lights, tail lights, and forward lights, and the drone's spinning and things. And so I think he thought I was having some sort of, I think disco was the word he used. He came tearing up on his quad bike, and I was actually with my wife on that one. She was giving me a hand, and he came tearing up on his quad bike and sort of started shouting at us for having a party up on the hill.
Did he? How did you respond to that? And when you explained to him, did he think, "Oh, that's quite a good idea. I like that. Can you send me a picture?"
Yeah, I'm fairly affable, and I think I just sort of tried to charm him and explain what we're doing, and he was fine. Yeah, I mean, you know that sort of first instance of when there's a confrontation and he's a bit heated, you can see he's a bit angry, and then it's all fine.
So I'm just trying to get an idea with the lighting. Was it always flash then, or when you say you were lighting up the tree, did you then move into constant light sources?
I did. Yeah, I switched about halfway through the project. So some of the images that you can see in the project, the earlier shots are done with flashlight on and off very quickly, which was great. But then I actually switched once I had the lone drone. I switched to quite powerful spotlights and did long exposures. And both techniques. So with the flash, obviously it's just a very quick exposure, or rather it's a long exposure, but the flash does the lighting very quickly because it's just the flash duration. And then when I switched over to continuous lighting, obviously the lighting's on for a much longer period. And there were kind of benefits and advantages and disadvantages to both ways. One of the great benefits of using a flash is that it would freeze the leaves. So if there was any wind and you're using a flash, then you could freeze the leaf, and that would look perfect. Whereas doing a longer exposure, they'd sort of sway slightly, and you get that kind of blurry effect with the leaves in the wind, which I thought I didn't want. But in hindsight, and looking at some of the photos, some of my favourite pictures from the project are actually where the leaves are slightly moving, and it almost gives the appearance that the tree's kind of vibrating or something.
Or life, I suppose.
Yeah, it definitely gives it some motion, because they're quite static. They're quite sort of quiet images, but the ones where the leaves are moving around, I know I look at trees and I wonder about the history. I know you do. I was working at a venue, probably 3-4 weeks back, where Queen Elizabeth I had planted this magnificent oak. It sits in the. You probably like it actually. It sits in the middle of a field, has a plaque just sort of about quarter of a mile away from it, and so the tree is on its own. It's lonely. Right. There's a fascination, isn't there, for what they may have bore witness to. Yes, definitely. You can't help but think, especially in that environment on your own at night time when it's just you and the tree, you can't help but wonder the things that the tree has seen, the things that have happened around the tree. I mean, one of the very earliest trees that I photographed, just because of proximity from my house and because of lockdowns, I wasn't venturing very far, but it's a beech tree. And it's a solitary beech tree, sits on top of an area here called the Roundway Downs, which is a site of historical interest, in so much as one of the biggest battles of the English Civil War took place up there. So the sort of large amounts of casualties that apparently they still sort of find in the ground and things like that. And that beech tree would have been there, and so you start thinking about the things it's seen, and it's quite a fantastic thing to think about, really. And
you've learned really about the mycelium network, haven't you? You've really learned about trees. I mean, it's been a learning process for you through and through, not just lighting, but actually a nature learning process.
Definitely, I wouldn't say that I don't know. I didn't go into it as a kind of. I didn't have lots of information about trees. I didn't know lots about them. I was just sort of slightly fascinated by them, in the sense that it was just more of an aesthetic thing. But I just started reading, there's a fantastic book called The Secret Life of Trees, which I don't know if you've read.
I don't know it, no. Okay.
It's an amazing book. It's one of the most interesting books I've ever read. And I just started reading it as I was doing the project, and I've completely forgotten the author's name, so you'll have to look that up.
I'll look it up, and I'll do a link.
A mind blank. I'm trying to remember it while I'm talking, but I can't. I'm sure it'll come to me in a bit. But anyway, it's a wonderful book. And and they just, reading that whilst doing the project was just really eye-opening, and added another level to the whole thing, especially, as I say, when I'm out there with them and learning these very interesting things that trees do. So the mycelium network, for example, that you just mentioned, which is this underground network, communication and nutrition exchange network.
It's amazing, isn't it? Yeah.
Oh, it's mind-blowing, absolutely mind-blowing. And these mycelium, so the mycelium's a fungus, isn't it? And these networks can be huge, miles wide in length, and it connects the trees together. And they, for example, that if one tree is being attacked by an invasive beetle or something that's causing damage, they send signals and they send nutrients to help the tree and warn others and things like that. It's really crazy. I mean, it doesn't sound real, but
it is.
It is. Yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah.
Really fascinating.
Are you still? I know life has gone back to. I hesitate to use the word normal, but in the UK we're seeing slightly more normality than many other areas that I know that I hear from listeners that are living under certain lockdown regimes, if you want to use that phrase still.
Yeah.
But since we've had more freedom afforded us, and life's got back to some sort of semblance of normality, are you still able to get out there and do the trees, or have the portraits taken over?
Yeah, I haven't. I have to be honest. I haven't done as many as I would like to. I spent a lot of time researching, a lot of time finding interesting looking trees. The project, as it was a lockdown project, started very close to my house and it slowly spread out. And the trees of interest near me, whether it's historical or scientific, I've kind of done a lot of them already, but I'm aware of other trees much further away that would require a trip, maybe an overnight trip away. And I haven't had a chance to do those because as you say, work has sort of started going again, and I just don't have the time. And as I mentioned before we started recording, I've just had a baby, and that's kind of put paid to any kind of spare time for the moment. But I have every intention. I really felt like the project was only in its infancy when it started to get picked up and get recognised, which was amazing. I couldn't, I could never have dreamed that it would, but in the way that it did. But I still felt like it's in its infancy, and I've got many trees I still want to photograph, and other kind of ideas for sort of pushing the project to the next level and things like that, and maybe turning it into a book or something.
And Gareth Ewan-Jones will be back with us shortly for two other stories, two other personal projects, which I personally really enjoyed, and I hope you will as well. Here we are then, the photo walk. Don't they come round quickly each weekend? Well, it's a Friday photo walk, but I know many of you listen at the weekend, some on a Monday, some on a Tuesday. It doesn't matter. It's great always to receive your pictures from your walks and the stories that you make as well. Send those in to us, as we've said before. You with your camera, me with mine. I've got Barney, I've got Sir Barkalot with me this week. Say hello, Barney. I dare put the microphone down to him because he just steals the dead cat from the top. I've lost another one to Barney. He's able to reach a lot further. I forget, of course, he's no longer the small puppy that he once was. If you put something on the picnic table, bump, it's gone. He knows. He's very observant. He plays this game as well. I know he spots you put something down, and he's got that look in his eye. Oh, I'll get that later. Yeah. No, I'm not looking at that. No, I'm not interested in the slightest until you leave the room. Yes. A few thoughts now that I hope will help you, and to prove what an amazing collective of patrons we have who support this Photo Walk show with a modest donation each month. Although you can now support the show annually. So if you're not somebody that likes having a monthly outgoing, but you think, I'd support it annually, then you can. You can now do that. It's one of patrons' latest things. And to say thank you for your support, I make an additional short diary of a photographer-styled show each week. It's called More. And usually, well, not usually, that's not fair. Of late, there have been a few stories, and they're all true stories, by the way. Somebody the other day say that Catholic thing that you talked about in the church with the holy water, that didn't really happen, did it? Yes. Yes, it did. So, yeah, you hear those on there's a Patreon app where you can download the extra shows that I make for More, and the midweek one, which is the Unplugged Interviews show. And sometimes, the plan is to upload a few more of my and your pictures with stories attached as well. And you can see them on the Patreon app. Or, of course, you can log in via a website page as well. But that show that was about the holy, it was not the holy water show, but that More show that featured the story about the holy water also featured, I suppose really, they were rather extreme examples of critique being given, photographic critique. We talked about the importance of critique, and off the back of that show, Mike Miller in the comments section had some thoughts which I want to share with you. As I think critique is very important. It does help us grow, at least if it's given in a productive way or method, which, by the way, dovetails nicely with something that I asked my guest for next week's Photo Walk show. But in the meantime, from Mike Miller, Neil, the whole question of critiquing, it's not about tearing somebody down. It should be about building them up, exploring their thought processes when they were making the image, how the photographer felt or feels about their image, what lessons did they learn while making the picture, what might they do differently if they were to go out and photograph that location again. A true mentor cares about and has empathy for the person that they are mentoring. And a big part of that is creating a safe environment where open conversation can exist and thrive. Now, Mike, I noted that down. I mean, I have a reticence sometimes. I do get asked. I mean, I've been photographing a fair few years now to do portfolio reviews. And I usually pass on it. But with the thought of those facets that you've mentioned, well, I tell you what, I feel like I would like to be critiqued by somebody such as yourself, because you understand that process of a much more complete process of giving critique. It's not just about, oh, I like that because it's black and white, or the contrast looks okay on that, or maybe you've left a bit too much space there. No, this is far more in depth. So, Mike, I think I'll be coming to you for portfolio reviews. And then we have we have our patron Zoom. I'm going to call it a Zoom chat show now, because it's kind of turned into that. On the first Tuesday of a new month, so we've just had the one for June, 90 minutes. It went over, as always, where we talk picture making and share some photographs made. It's not a critique session as such. It's more a chance to discuss what's been made, where you've been, and the pictures that you've been working on, the projects that you've been working on. And I also set a question for those that are coming along to think about if they wish to take part, something to do with photographing and photography. And you hear those thoughts, of course, on this show from time to time, don't you? I've played back some patron thoughts in this part of the programme. And this month's was, name a thing, either technical or other, that has changed the way you photograph. So quite an open subject, really. Now, Andrew Hardacre in Hong Kong, who sadly never gets to join us, really, because of the time difference when we do our chat show, but he did write some thoughts to us both here. So I wanted to read them because he'd spent some time clearly thinking about this question. Name me a thing that you have discovered, either technically or other, that has changed the way you photograph. And he wrote, wow, Neil, I think there's a whole host of things. Not all easy to put into practice. Number one, so there's four. Simplicity. By that, he says, if I look at my favourite photographs, the word that I always think of is uncluttered. The elements of the image may be layered, but they don't compete with each other. And I think that's a really important facet about making photographs. Number two, I've learned to take fewer pictures, but don't be afraid to take shots around a specific subject. If you look at old contact sheets, great images were not often single frame shots, but a series trying out different approaches until one worked. Number three, I've learned there are no rules. The ones you read about should be broken without compunction. I routinely shoot deliberately into the light, but it depends, of course, on what I'm photographing. Flair, he says, isn't just a 1970s fashion disaster. I can't believe that you went on to admit that you once owned a pair of crimpline bell-bottom blues. He says, I do wake up in a sweat at night at the thought of a pair of purple flares. Yes. Number four, gas is better out than in. Buy less and learn to work with a small core of kit. I have cabinets full of gear, the bulk of which is never used. I've whittled down to 3 cameras, my M10R, lucky, my R5, let me make the noise again, lucky, and my X100F, beautiful camera. And to add to Andrew's thoughts, here are some recorded from the live Zoom show on Tuesday just gone, and maybe there'll be some thoughts in here that will help you too in your picture making. These are going to come fairly quickly, briskly into your ears, so ready yourself. And remember the question, name me a thing that you discovered, either technically or other, that has changed the way you photograph. Here is Jim and Peter and Craig and Lynn and Patrick.
Technically, it's nothing really new for a lot of people, but for me it was, and that's back button focus. I found that I was missing a lot of shots where focus was really critical, backyard birds and the like, and I realized I didn't have to focus over and over again. I was in the same place, the birds were in the same place, back button focus, let go of the button, everything's spot on as far as focus goes from that point.
One thing I've learned in terms of composition is it's okay to crop things. For instance, Mally's tree, you don't have to get the whole tree in the picture. You can cut off the top or a side and use that on one edge.
I learned that you can actually use everything other than just ISO 100 to shoot with. Having started doing landscapes, everybody tries to shoot everything at 100 ISO. And as soon as I started doing weddings, I realized inside of buildings, it's physically impossible to shoot with 100 ISO. And I learned that bumping the ISO to get everything a little bit brighter was the way to go. And the fear of grain within my photos fell away. And actually now I love the grain in my photos.
For me, it was the acceptance that we all see and interpret scenes differently, and that I may admire other photographers' images, but I no longer get hung up on the fact that mine don't look like theirs. I'm perfectly happy with mine now.
Yeah, right. For me, it was auto ISO. Basically, I'm an old school guy and often taking pictures at concerts. So it's always like, what film am I going to use? What sensitivity, what kind of the white balance, should I use a tungsten film or what are the conditions? I use black and white, use some neopan 1600 or something. Will that be enough? Now forget all that. Put everything on opto, use A mode, open the f-stop and just go. Just let it happen.
And my thanks to Jim and Peter and Craig and Lynn and Patrick. Come on, Barney, this way. Come on. This is not the time to sit down. We've still got a few miles to go yet. Oh, have we? I know, he's giving me that face. He's giving me that, can't we just stop for a Garibaldi look? Shh, don't tell everybody I might feed you Garibaldis. I don't really do that. Yes, you do. No, I don't. Yes, you do. To join our wonderful supporters, he says, changing subject quickly, find the yellowy orange box on the top left of the website photographydaily.show. Yellowy orange, Neil. Surely you're more in touch with colour than that as a photographer. Well, yeah, I can't quite figure out. It's our corporate colour, but I can't quite figure out. Is it yellow? Is it orange? It's yellowy orange. Well, yeah, I suppose you could do it as a Photoshop value, which is, now you're stretching me. E5 F10, E5 F10, D, is it D or is it B? Yellowy orange. That'll do. Right, back to your letters. Here is one from Matt Ogier Russell, and his pictures you will find on the show page today. I'm having to navigate this letter a bit in my British, stop it, will you, way, as there's some flattery involved. And I am, as you well know, pre-programmed to feel genuinely awkward at this point, but I'm going to give it a go. Oh, look at Barney. He's trying to pull a whole branch down. Now, Barney, come on, darling, this way. That's attached to a tree. Come on. Really? Come on, this way. Good boy. Hello, Neil, says Matt. Thank you for reading out and publishing my response to Giles Penfound's project a few weeks ago. Me, my Pentax, and my daughter. Oh, yes, I remember that. But it raised a question I have as to how do you read out the letters so eloquently, stop it, will you now, as far as I can tell verbatim, if you ignore the pauses to negotiate gates, etc., without catastrophic results. Do not forget, Matt, that I do have catastrophic results. Do you not remember when I grabbed hold of the electric fence? Well, it was a good few months back. I can't remember. It was a field full of horses, and I was sort of going down one sort of edge of it. I didn't have Barney with me. It was just me, and I completely forgot and grabbed hold of the electric fence. That was a bit of a shocking moment. Pun fully intended. Anyway, Matt says, as somebody who listens on a Monday to the Photowalks with Willow, my pup, and usually camera in hand, dog lead, dog treats, poo bags, human treats, I've recently revisited Garibaldi's after many years, he says, and they're much nicer than I recall. I would surely end up in a hedgerow within seconds of putting eye to paper, be it tree-based or electronic. Are you just extremely spatially aware, or do you have a full production crew with you on your walks to enable smooth negotiation of obstacles? I think we all know the answer to that. No, I do not have a huge production crew. Otherwise, I wouldn't have to stop every so often today, for example, and stop Sabark a lot from eating. What are you eating now? Goose what's it? Oh, come on. Surely the food we give you is much nicer than that. But I walk, I think it would be fair to describe the way that I walk as slow. And I do bump into stuff, particularly in the woodland, actually. I regularly turn my ankle. I've no idea, this is probably tempting fate now, how my ankle hasn't had really horrible things happen to it, and I've not been able to walk the following week. But so far, so good. It's obviously these fantastic boots I wear. My second how do you do it, oh, there's two, are there, relates to the use of sound in conjunction with your images. I belong to the Village Camera Club, and we set a monthly project for ourselves. This month, it is, or was, Bridge, which was set whilst I was away in Lisbon visiting my son, who is also a keen photographer, by the way. You are more than likely to know that Lisbon has a fantastic Golden Gate Bridge running from the main town to the other side of the river where my son lives, and it's a fantastic photo opportunity. I'm not so familiar with that bridge, actually. But Lisbon, Matt, is on my ever-growing list of must-take-my X100V there places. I dare even think what carbon footprint that list has now, how many trees I shall have to plant to neutralise it. Needless to say, I am firmly removed, I believe, from Greta's virtual Christmas card list. If you've ever been to Lisbon, says Matt, then you'll know that the carriageway is partly surfaced with a metal mesh to allow air to pass through it, so it's more stable than that famous bridge that started resonating in the wind before collapsing a good few years ago now. How do you combine your photography with your audiography, as he's called it? Right, well, we kind of have covered sound today a little bit already, but not in so much, not insofar as, well, not in a technical way anyway. So breaking out of the letter for a moment, and my other listener might get a nosebleed because we're just about to get a bit tech about making short films that can contain your pictures and the sounds that you record to go with your stories. Back to Matt. I recorded a 29-second excerpt on my trusty iPhone 6 Plus. As a Linux or Linux, depending where you are in the world, user, I was able to extract the sound using QuinFF, added some blank space using Audacity, which is your sound tool, and then used Imagination Slide Maker to create the finished article. But what a faff! It took me nearly a day to create a 4-minute show. Is this a case of doing what it takes for one's art, or is there a really simple way I can make these films? Well, thank you, he says, for the podcast. It's not just about photography, it's about life. The good, the bad, the happy, the sad. But then to me, that is what photography is all about. And you are absolutely right. Thank you, says Matt. Thank you, Matt. Your system, actually, and the reason why I chuckled a bit there, was that it sounds worryingly, you may say, similar-ish to mine in terms of the number of things that are happening. Let me tell you my order of stuff. It's really sort of very similar to yours, but just using different software. So, number one, I record the audio on my phone, as you do. You've got a 6 Plus. I've got an 8 Plus. But the audio that I record from that goes onto my computer, or Mac in my case. I pop it through a program called Audition. So, yeah, that's my software for editing sound. But this is something I do that makes life a bit easier. I apply a filter. I suppose it's a bit like when we work in Photoshop or Lightroom. Other flavors of editing software available, of course. I add a filter. It's a sound filter in this case. It's called Broadcast. You'll find it in the hundreds of filters that are within the program already that Adobe have done such a great job with that I've tweaked mine very, very slightly, but not much, if I were to be honest with you. And then I export it as an MP3 file or WAV file to the desktop, and I have an image-ready sound to simply add to my film editor, which can be, there's many simple or complex programs, aren't there? There's Premiere, is there still Movie Maker? That's a Windows one, isn't it? Movie Maker? Oh, Neil, Movie Maker? I think there is. It could be Rush. It could be, well, insert your favourite flavour of film editor here, and then I mix it all together, and we've got a film that we can put on Vimeo or YouTube, and I then embed that in my website. There we go, nosebleed over, tech stuff done. Look, if you're interested in making these kind of films where your audio and still images can come together for storytelling, we've talked about it twice today, wouldn't it be a good idea? I'll do a Patreon photo film night. How about that? I won't be able to do... There we go, let's go through this gate. I won't be able to do everything in a detailed fashion as I can when I'm sat there with somebody in the room and we're editing a film together, looking over each other's shoulders. But I can do a pretty good introductory evening, I'm sure. So should we do that, like a night at the opera in July on Photo Films? I'll send out an invite in Patreon. There we go. In the meantime, fancy some inspiration? Let's hear from one of my absolute favourite episodes. Neil, you're not supposed to have favourites, I know. Neil's arm links from episode 279, an episode called A Life Well Lived, Making Pictures.
So like last Friday, a friend of mine, another kind of photographer, reached out and said, the weather's going to be amazing on Friday. Have you got any time to take off? And we can go and see if we can get above it. And I kind of looked out the window in the morning, and it looked like the cloud base was really quite high. You know, you can sort of see some of the Lake District fells from this window where I'm sat now, and I could see that they're quite high up. So I started looking at various webcams, and I thought, you know what, I could invest a lot of energy here into kind of going up this mountain and actually finding that when you get to the top, you're just stuck in pea soup, and you know, you've kind of put all that effort in for nothing really. But then as it turns out, you know, as you kind of like walking through the cloud, you can sort of see it starting to thin out, and you look up and you can nearly see a little bit of blue kind of poking through, and that really fills you with a lot of excitement, because you think, yeah, I think we can make this. I think actually the mountains are high enough to burst through it. And then it becomes this weird kind of, I don't know, I sort of associate it a little bit to like a masking tool in like Photoshop or Lightroom, where it's very selective, you know, only mountains that are over like 800 meters were poking out. So it's only the big ones that were kind of seen around you, and it was stunning. Yeah, it was a cracking day. And it, like I say, a lot of people would have kind of looked outside and gone, oh, I'm not going to go out today. So you end up just being there all by yourself on this little mountain island in the sea of clouds. It's beautiful.
An absolute privilege talking to Neil's arm links. I'll link, of course, to his episode on the show notes page today. Right, if you haven't joined our Facebook group, here is a reminder to say what a wonderful community we have in there as well. And as long as you're wearing the right sort of trainers, we'll let you in. We have a Facebook page, we have a Facebook group, and sometimes, of course, from the group we take some of the subjects that and the pictures that we then talk about on the Photowalk. And if you have a story to tell and you're not really into the book of face, then you can send those in, please. I was about to say in the old-fashioned way, which would involve an envelope with a card envelope that says "Do not bend," that's then ceremoniously bent by whoever puts it through the letterbox. But send them in by email, your pictures, your stories of where you've been walking, what you've been seeing, what you've been doing, and we've talked about photo films today. If you have links to some YouTubes that you've made where you've made walks and you've recorded the sound as well to go along with your still images, then send it to the email address, the links and the pictures, to studio@photographydaily.show. studio@photographydaily.show. Let's have a last couple of letters before we hear again from my guest today, Gareth Ewan Jones. Lynn Fraser. Lynn, where have you been? Hi, Neil. I had a short trip to the Isle of Barra. Beautiful, with a friend. A time for a bit of R&R and pootling about with the camera. The trip coincided with listening to episode 287. I rarely get to walk with my camera and earphones on a Friday, so Photography Daily gets listened to doing other things usually. That particular Friday, I did go for a photo walk, but minus PD in the ears. You can't really say to a friend that you're walking with, I'm not going to talk to you because I'm listening to Neil. No, you can't. That would be the height of rudeness. You're quite right. These are some of the sketchbook images I took ambling along the road from the cottage where we stayed to the ferry terminal and back again. A snapshot of that part of the island, and in some ways a walk through history. A palimpsest landscape. Always fascinating. Yes, indeed. Regards, Lynn. Lynn, these are fabulous pictures. And they'll be on the show page today. I am practically there with you through these pictures. Really, I am. What I love about Barra, by the looks of it, is how you could just you could wander for hours without perhaps meeting more than a handful of people. Just wonderful solace, solitude, fantastic. Next up, a letter from Erland Lillebo. Hi there, Neil. Hope you're doing well. I am, thank you. The podcast is getting better and better. I enjoy every minute of it. Thank you. I will wear that flattery uneasily. Thought I'd share some photos from a wonderful spring evening walk in the outskirts of the town of Alesund in Norway land with my dog Frodo. Keep up the good work and never stop making this podcast. Oh, there's a challenge. There's pressure. I'm coming to Norway land in August, actually, to photograph a wedding. I'm thoroughly looking forward to it. There's a link to your Instagram, which I will pop on the show page so that we can see more of your work. And right, my guest this week has been Gareth Ewan-Jones. This week we're really concentrating, I suppose, well, not I suppose, we are concentrating upon projects and how precious they can be. We often talk about projects, don't we? And how they don't have to be grand, big statement projects. They can be, as you will find out from my guest next week. Neil, you keep teasing this guest next week. I hope you're going to tell us more about him or her soon. Yes, I will. We talk about projects, actually, not having to be grand statements, but yeah, more about that in a while. Ooh, that'll be the lunchtime express to our coffee barn. Now, just so this makes sense, caravans, because we're about to talk about it, or them, or the subject of, with my guest, Gareth Ewan-Jones. Now, I know that caravans aren't exclusively British, or even our invention, or are they? Well, that's irrelevant anyway. They exist around the world, but there does seem to be a unique relationship that caravan owners have with carrying your shell upon your back, British style. And Gareth in his project has, I think, captured this absolutely perfectly, with humour. Personally, I find caravans a bit of an odd thing. Despite having stayed in them on holiday and actually had a good time. I mean, it is fun. Caravanning, camping, I think, is a fun way to holiday, but they do have all the heat insulation of a portcullis, don't they? And the nasty tricks caravanners play on each other. I mean, if you're not liked on the park where you're holidaying, you'll find your compatriots might well sprinkle bread on your roof of an evening, and then come the morning when the sun starts coming up, 1,000 gulls pecking on your roof from 4 a.m. And then, so that's one of the projects that Gareth's about to talk about. And then Morris dancers. Now, you know how I feel about Morris dancers. I am nervous about them and have, in equal dose, a fascination. I really do. And I'm smiling broadly. I'm not sure if you can hear it through my voice, because next week I'm photographing a wedding where Morris dancing is taking place. So yes, we've got two projects that are, I suppose, quintessentially quite English, certainly in the way that they've been photographed. Two projects that I felt drawn to for all kinds and manner of reasons. Here is the British photographer talking about them, Gareth Ewan-Jones, Part 2. Well, we have something in common, Gareth, when it comes to the east coast of England and caravanning and camping. Though you spent your time in a caravan, in our family we battle with those fierce coastal winds that Southwold can get. Re-pegging our canvas most of the time, I seem to remember. Southwold is an incredible place, isn't it? My dad has a plaque on the pier there, my late father. Oh, wow. Yeah.
Brilliant.
I'm sure you know the pier and the plaques and the history.
Yeah. I mean, I'm aware of it. I haven't been there for a long time. I mean, so that is where I went as a young boy. My parents used to take me to Southwold on caravanning holidays most summers, actually, and I absolutely adored it and loved it and really fell in love with it.
Walberswick with a lovely little inlet.
Yes.
And
Yes, yeah, beautiful. Yeah, so I think that those childhood experiences led to. I mean, I'm not a sort of caravan enthusiast per se myself. Like I always had fond memories of those holidays, and I always knew that it was a very colourful and friendly world.
Yes.
But as an adult, I didn't really do those sorts of holidays until. So you were referring to another project called Caravan, which
yes, I am. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was, I think, it started
a great British love story, apparently.
Yeah. Did you like that?
Yeah, I did.
We sort of there was a lot of backwards and forwards with the publishers about that. Yeah. But I really liked it. My wife came up with it actually, and I really liked it. So we hired a motorhome to undertake that project, which basically involved best part of a year on the road, going to lots of sites and meeting lots of people. And that was really the thing that kind of reignited my love of camping and caravanning. And I now actually own a motorhome. I bought a motorhome. Yeah, I bought a motorhome a couple of years ago. So I'm very much back in that world now. But I have to say, at the point at which I started that project, I wasn't really in it. I just sort of thought it was interesting. Yeah. But I did love those holidays in South Wales.
So tell me about the project then, how it came about. Was it a commission first or was it a project first and commission later?
No, I was very fortunate with that one, actually. It was commissioned first, in the sense that a book publisher of which I was working with, they wanted to they did a lot of children's books at the time, illustrated books, and they wanted to branch out into photography books. Yeah. And I was just very fortunate. They sort of came to me and said, did I have any projects on the go that might make a good photo book? And I'd been sort of doing bits and bobs with the caravan thing where I'd gone to local sites and spent weekends there and taken photos. And I pitched it to them, showed them some of the sort of test imagery that I'd done, and they absolutely loved it and went for it straight away and sort of commissioned it there and then on the spot. So yeah, it just then enabled me to kind of get the funding together and get on with organising all the logistics. And
people are very house proud of their caravans. The one thing I see through your piece, and I'm seeing, of course, a fraction of the photographs that will be available through the book, but they are very, very house proud, aren't they?
Yes, yeah, you're right. They are. Yeah, they take it all very seriously, and they're an extremely friendly bunch. The other thing I found with that project was that the access was incredible. I kind of went into it thinking the access to the subject was incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of went into it thinking they might be a bit shy or a bit sort of reserved about having a photographer come inside these spaces that they care so, they look after and they care so much about. But everybody was incredibly open and engaging and really happy to show off. There was so much pride, as you say, that you could see so much pride in these interiors, the way they're all laid out. Because effectively, you buy your caravan or your motorhome, whatever it is, and they come as a kind of standard layout, don't they? But everybody sort of does their own modifications and their own layouts and things. So they're really proud to show them off. You're right.
So was it literally a case of knock on the door, can I come in and make pictures of your caravan?
Yeah, it really was.
Was it really?
Yeah, it was just strike up a conversation, explain what it was I was doing and hoping to do. I think I can't remember, but I'm sure I probably had some example. That thing where you have some example images in your show subject, so they have an idea of what you're doing. And I think that really helps if they can see the sort of thing, because it's so hard to communicate, isn't it? Visual things with language, that just showing somebody something and then going, oh, okay, I see what you're doing, you can come in. Yeah, that's exactly it. Just going from site to site. So I was very fortunate in that the Camping and Caravan Club, the UK's biggest society for that sort of thing, were happy to let me on to all their sites, because they're all private sites, and it would have been really tricky to do that without, I had to sought permission from every private individuals that owns the sites, whereas the Camping Caravan Club own hundreds, and they were happy to have me on. So it just meant I had the access.
Well, that bears a question, actually, that you have to be careful when you're making pictures of, say, caravanners, that the eccentricity angle, which I know was an angle of this Great British love story, doesn't become a sort of a line stepped over where you're perceived to be making humour at somebody's expense, because it could so easily become that.
Yeah,
there's the chap, of course, holding the carrier bags with his nicely well invested belly hanging out.
Yeah,
those images that are almost a bit par-esque.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean, and I was very wary. I didn't want it to be something that was sort of joking and pointing fingers, and I didn't really want it to be. I wanted to show, because as you mentioned earlier, there is such a love and a passion within that community, that subculture, that like I just wanted to show that and not sort of point and laugh and go, haha, look at, because there is a lot of funny things, but that for me that wasn't really the focus. It was always just trying to convey what it meant to these people, the subjects, rather than sort of showing the sort of absurdity of it, I suppose.
Yeah. Are you always looking out for projects? I would imagine it's a bit like a street portrait photographer. If you step out on the streets with him or her and you're thinking, are you listening to me, or are you looking for your next subject? I wonder whether your mind works like that, because this is, these are fascinating ideas.
I am. I guess like all photographers, I have 101 ideas in my head, of which not many ever kind of come together or work that well. Yeah, I'm definitely always on the lookout, and it's interesting when you have a project that's so well received as the Tree project.
Yes.
You always kind of want instinct to better everything, isn't there? In a way, it's not a healthy thing, but I think you always want to do something bigger and better for the next. And so the Tree project's been so well received. I'm thinking, gosh, am I ever going to top that? It's such a difficult thing.
Isn't it called the Spielberg next film syndrome or something?
Is that what it is? Right, that would make sense. Yeah, that would make sense. But yeah, I think I'll probably go back to people. I can't imagine I'm going to do inanimate objects again.
Right, the third project. On your website is the title Boss on the drop down for projects, and it reveals something of British culture that both thoroughly intrigues me and makes me a little bit nervous all at the same time. Morris dancing. And for our international audience, perhaps I can let you take the lead on explaining what Morris dancing is.
Thank you, Neil. Well, so Morris dancing is a traditional folk English form of dance, typically would be performed by sort of a group of men. I think it would be fair to say. Yeah. Traditionally, it would be performed by sort of...
I think you described it as grey-bearded men in your website.
Did I? Yeah. Okay, so I'm trying to be careful with my words. But yeah, okay, so middle-aged, grey-bearded men, that's the kind of thing that springs to the mind's eye when you talk about Morris dancing. So yeah, it's a traditional form of folk, uses a lot of bells. On the clothes are adorned with bells.
That's right.
That's quite a common thing. Yeah,
ankle bells and
wrist bells and all that sort of stuff. And then you tend to have an accordion player.
That's right.
Doing the music, and then the troupe would dance around. So Boss was just caught my eye. It was one of those projects that just sort of fell into my lap really, and I saw them on Instagram or something like that, one of the social media spaces, and they are so Boss Morris is the name of the troupe, the Morris dancing troupe, and they are an all-female, quite a young group, all-female, and I guess they would label themselves as progressive Morris dancing, if you can imagine such a thing. So they tend to wear very bright, very flashy, or sort of neon-y. So their look is very different, but actually what they're doing is the same. So their dances are following traditional dances, and their music is traditional music, and but actually just the way they look is very different, and it just really caught my eye because it's such a clash of that kind of culture that I thought it would make a nice sort of project. So I got in touch with them and shadowed them a few times when they were out and about on May Day celebrations, and then did some portraits separately. So yeah, it was just a nice project that just happened to fall into my lap.
So what are you looking to photograph when you're making a project like that? Because sure, you could just make lots of pictures of people dancing, but it doesn't want to be quite as obvious as that, does it?
No, I like to try and spend as much time as I can in those sort of subculture. Subculture stuff really fascinates me. So if I can go in and immerse myself and spend time with them, then that's the way I like to approach those sorts of projects. I don't necessarily have an idea of what I want to do when I get there. So I might just look at something and think, aesthetically, I imagine that's quite interesting. Let's go and spend some time. But I don't necessarily go into it with an idea of how I want it to look. I just kind of let it happen and then spend enough time. It almost sort of puts itself together.
It's become a kind of a side. I'm hesitant to use the word joke, but I'm going to on this show when I talk about Morris dancers. I was trying to remember why I felt a little bit squeamish about Morris dancing, in the same way that some people feel a bit odd about clowns, because actually the music and the fun of it's a sort of a hypnotic edge to it. It is on face value a lot of fun to watch. But then I saw your picture of the dancer dressed with a horse's head, meeting the meeting of the horse's head dancer and the dog looking up in confusion. And I remembered instantly that was the kind of feature that made me feel a little unnerved. do the dancers go into? Because it seems to me they become other personas as soon as they're dressed in their Morris dancing gear.
Yeah, I think there is an element of that sort of, I hesitate to use the word pagan because I'm not entirely sure, but definitely there's a sort of tribalism to it, and a kind of a losing of oneself within the music. You can really see that when you watch them. Yeah. And those outfits that you're talking about, I know what you mean. They're very, it's almost something out of a sort of folk horror movie. They're quite striking. They really grab your attention. I guess it's deliberate because it is hypnotic when you watch them in these oversized face masks. Yeah. And actually, there's a huge Morris dancing festival which takes place, I think it's on May Day every year, down in Hastings. Have you ever been to that? Have you ever seen that?
No, I haven't, no.
I think it's called Green. It's either Green Man or Green King. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's a huge festival. If you go down there, it's an amazing place to people watch and to take a camera and to just take portraits, because everybody's happy to be photographed, and you really get to see, because everybody dresses. They go to town with their outfits and they bring out the biggest sort of maddest headdress they've got, and there's lots of like Minotaur stuff, and you see a lot of that really kind of freaky looking bits and bobs.
We often say that the project is a sort of protector of the creative soul on this show, and for somebody who one day may be photographing the most incredible VIPs, and if you go and visit Gareth's website, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, to the next day making portraits, I'll call them portraits, of trees. It really is important, isn't it, to find something that sits aside from your everyday, what you're photographing.
Yes, it definitely is very important. I think as a for want of a better term, as a jobbing photographer, there's a thing there's a thing that you're doing for work, and you try and bring your creativity to that, but it's not always as possible as it might be outside of it. So for me, doing my own work, my own personal projects, that really helps me kind of just keep that creativity going, keep the ideas flowing, because I'm very grateful for the work I do, for the portraits that I do, but some of the time it's kind of somewhat dictated. It's quite sort of there's a specific end goal, basically. You know what you're going in for, you know what you want, you've got briefs and things like that, whereas I really enjoy just the melee of just being there, observing things and seeing what happens, which isn't always possible with those types of portraits that you're talking about. So yeah, for me, it's really important. I really love to have that opposite, that contrast to my day-to-day work.
And I was looking through your Instagram feed, I love that you find characters within your work. I'm thinking Andrew Zaminsky, the stonemason in particular. He's one of the more recent ones. Do you find these people via commissions, or is it a process of finding them and then, because I know we've touched on it, but then building a story out of them? Because I think more and more photographers I'm hearing are having to, or needing to, sell them in, as it were, to publications.
Yes, I think for me it's 80% commissioned. The chap Andrew Zaminsky was definitely a commission, but I'm quite fortunate, and I seem to have established myself as somebody that does these sort of British things, and so I get to meet a lot of interesting British people with interesting jobs, like stonemasons and people that drive steam engines. So I get given a lot of that stuff. So I'm very lucky, because I also love it. It's also what I'm passionate about, is meeting these interesting characters. But yeah, I'd say 80% of it is come from commission. There has certainly been occasions where I've met somebody interesting and then pitched it as an idea to a magazine, and they'll run a feature off the back of a portrait. I
read you're a recently converted cold water enthusiast, by the way.
Yeah. Are you also?
No. I absolutely love the idea, and I look at people doing it, and I've stood on, we did a programme in Brighton not so long ago, and I spoke to two women who were 365ers when it came to being in that water. Yeah. And I looked at them and I looked at it and I thought, it feels like I should be jumping in there, but I just can't.
Well, I always remember somebody saying to me, you'll never regret going into cold water.
Right.
And I think that's true. You don't want to do it. Instinctively, your body is saying, no, that's silly. Don't do that. That's going to be horrible. But actually, once you're out, you never regret. I don't think I have never regretted going into cold water. And there's something to it, isn't there? I mean, there's such a craze for it at the moment. Yeah. And these 365ers, there's got to be something there just to keep those people going. And for me, I've had so many wonderful experiences. I built a cold tub in my house, and that's great. And that has a very, very specific cold water experience that gives you the intrinsic benefits of cold water. But actually, what I really love is just going out and jumping in rivers or jumping in the sea, because then you're in nature and then you get a completely different experience, but with all those intrinsic benefits.
Did you start out by doing the cold shower routine, which I know is very popular at the moment, popularised by one Dutchman, Wim Hof?
Yeah, the Wim Hof.
The Iceman.
No, I didn't. I went straight to cold tub, actually.
Did you?
Because of the lockdown. So it's quite a recent thing for me. So the lockdown, like everybody else, I suddenly had so much more time and trying to fill my days with things. So I just built a cold tub out of an old agricultural water butt and filled it with water and ice, and that was it.
You do the full ice thing as well. It's not just the cold water.
Yeah. Well, because you got to keep the temperature down. So ice was how I was doing it at first.
What health benefits have you found?
For me personally, it just the endorphin rush that you get from immersing yourself in cold water, it's just invigorating, unlike anything else, I would say. And so when you come out, it doesn't matter what mood you go in, it's very hard to come out of a cold body of water and still be in a funky mood if you went in a funky mood, you know. So it can just sort of change my day. It's incredible, and it's a wonderful way to start the day. You don't need coffee when you use cold water.
And there's no messing about, is there? You get straight in. I mean,
you have to.
The cold shower routine, which most people start with, which I have been doing, if you start midway and you start to increase it, it just, you might as well just put it all the way around to the left, as it is on my tap system, and walk in. Yeah,
I actually think cold showers are harder in some respects because it's like ripping off a plaster, isn't it? It's like the cold shower. It's a slow thing, and it's getting different parts of the body. But when you're immersed in cold water, it's there, it's done, it's really quick. Yeah. And then you adjust. With a cold water shower, I mean, I've tried it a few times, and I've always thought like you never quite get to the point of which you do if you just dunk yourself underneath. You're just still sort of fighting it, maybe. So yeah, I think they're probably harder to get used to. Anyway,
I have to ask, what keeps you as a photographer? Times have been tough. You've said obviously getting back into it is a slow drip process, but there's something that keeps us photographing, isn't there? What is it for you?
I don't know. Maybe it's as simple as it's the only thing I've ever felt passionate about. I don't have any interest in anything else. I can't imagine at this point doing anything else. It's the only thing I would care deeply about. It's the only thing I think I'm pretty good at. I can't imagine what it is I would do. It's interesting when you do it as a professional photographer, when you're doing it sort of day in, day out, that the magic that was there at the beginning is sort of there, but it's almost pushed into the background a little bit, and you have to work a little bit harder to try and find it. But it does expose itself every now and then, and when it does, it's just such a wonderful feeling. Like I'm so fortunate and thankful to be doing this thing that I've always loved. So yeah, I think that's it. It's just the one thing in my life that I am very, very passionate about.
And my thanks to Gareth Ewan-Jones for being my guest this week on the show. For links to Gareth, to Giles Penfound, to Niels Armerlinks and the other photographers that you've heard from or about today, Instagrams and websites that we've mentioned, please go to today's show page, which is on photographydaily.show, the website, or indeed you can follow the link in your podcast player app, and that will also take you there. I'll tell you what's on the More show tomorrow in a moment, and also about our guest. It's a very different Photowalk show next week, actually. I'm very excited about it. Can you tell? I'll tell you more about that in a moment as well. Now, we always have a play-out song, don't we? That piece of music that you can complete your walk to, make your final frames. We haven't made a lot of pictures today. I've been concentrating on your letters. Remember, I can't do too many things at the same time. You know me, but I'll put up my pictures on the right at the bottom. I know my place on the show page today as well. Right, our song that we finish our walk to. Now, last week I played you a song by Harry Keyworth, and I'm going to play you another one because I love Harry's work. This one's a tad longer than last week. It's called Flux. Wonderful song. But we have a postscript as well, just some final thoughts. And the postscript today is one from a certain Bill J, the thinker, the advocate of photography. And he is important because, yes, next week we are going to be talking about him with my guest. So here's the PS this week from Bill J. And he says, think clearly, act sensibly, commit yourself to caring and work hard in order to discover joy. Then give the images back to the world from which they were taken. I'll leave you with those thoughts while we play Flux.
floods in your mind.
And Flux. And that's it for this week. My thanks to Gareth Ewan-Jones, our guest, mpb.com, and those who are patrons, which you can join through the link on the website photographydaily.show. I think I said earlier, go top left for the yellowy orangey button. I know it's right. I did. And for those wonderful supporters who are patrons, tomorrow it is the More Show. It's your own weekend oasis of a little extra for your kind support. And we're going to be talking about, stand by, because it's a tad alternative in places, a photographic graveyard find, and being a specialist in your field. Now, they are the two photographic bits, but there's a very unusual behind-the-scenes recording too, as the third feature of tomorrow's More, from the voice you hear on this show, which does all the branding, like the Photowalk and Today on the Photowalk, the voice, if you will. A very talented voiceover artist with a perfectly warm style for us, called Mel Hampshire. Now, I've known Mel for 22, 23 years, something like that. And she sent me last weekend, while she was partying, I might add, some changes to a script. But, well, look, the message that came with the changes I thought you may enjoy and find a tad humorous. It's a behind-the-scenes glimpse that, well, look, I'll play it to you tomorrow. I'm not quite sure how to promote it. It's always a special week, I like to think, but next week especially, Monday, the much-revered environmental photographer Nick Brandt is back. this time to set an assignment. And he's going to ask you to channel some anger for a challenge that has us giving you a full month to fulfill. And then next Friday, a different kind of Photowalk show. I go to Gloucestershire to spend time and walk with the photographer, the curator, the professor, the podcaster, the filmmaker, the writer, the art director. It's Grant Scott for the United Nations of Photography and the voice behind A Photographic Life, the podcast. We walk and we talk about picture making, and Grant shares the benefit of many decades working as and with photographers, including the likes of Don McCullin. Just thought I'd throw one name in for you, though there are many more.
Every time I was on a shoot, I would ask questions and I would look and see what are they doing, and then finally, I was on a shoot in LA with Meg Ryan, the actress, and the photographer was doing it, and I wrote about this, and this upset a huge amount of photographers, which I don't understand why, but it did. But it does seem quite easy to upset photographers. Being one, I don't get upset. But anyway,
and you're about to now, probably.
Well, I just said, we were doing the shoot. The photographer it was Hasselblad on a tripod, and he was photographing Meg, and he wasn't really connecting with her, and the shoot had to go in a certain way, and so I was standing next to him talking to her, and like we're talking now, just having conversation, and she was responding and he was pressing the shutter and getting the pictures. And I suddenly thought, well, hang on a minute here, I'm doing the hard work. I know how to set this up. I know how that camera works. I could do this.
Music today is from the wonderful artlist.io. My personal thanks to Neil Ford, Emily Renier and Andrea Gilpin for helping to sprinkle the magic behind the scenes. And I look forward to photographing with you, hearing from you and talking with you next time. Come on, Buns. What have you got? A stick? It's my favourite stick. I know it is. Pick it up. Come on, bring it with us. It's way too large. You've got to think more practically when you're stick strategizing. It's too big, isn't it? Come on. You're just whipping yourself with it as you walk. Leave that one. Let's find another one. Come on. There's loads of sticks. It's not like there's a stick shortage. Not that one. That's attached to it. Come on. That's actually attached to the tree. That is daft.
Photography Daily is a Loading Zone production.